Joe's a 26-year-old coder, and he spends a ton of time sitting in front of the computer. Several months ago, his neck and shoulders got really sore. He got a sharp pain when he turned his head to the side. Joe figured it was from sleeping wrong. His symptoms went away, so he assumed it was nothing. Then, a few weeks after that, his forearm felt like it was on fire. Again, his symptoms resolved over the weekend, so he didn't think much of it. But then these symptoms occurred more and more frequently. His symptoms stopped going away. It killed him to use the keyboard, and he absolutely hated his mouse. Hello, I'm Deborah Quilter, and I've written 2 books on repetitive strain injury. Joe is a composite of the young men who have come to me for advice about RSI after they've gotten injured. Like most people, Joe thought he should get a better ergonomic setup, and that would fix everything. He asked his employer for a new chair and a different keyboard. The chair felt wonderful because it supported everything from his spine to his elbows, even his head, kind of like being in a hammock. The backrest and neck support put Joe's spine in the shape of a capital C, just like how he liked to sit. But when it came time to type, it was a disaster. He could barely reach the keyboard, and his neck was now really killing him because he had to crane his head forward to view the monitor. Using the new keyboard strained his forearms. He habitually rested his elbows and wrists while he was typing, but he had no idea how doing this could lead to serious soft tissue injuries. Instead of helping, the new setup made Joe's symptoms worse and added a few. Now Joe is having horrible elbow pain. He used to love playing the guitar, but it's really all he can do to keep doing his job as a coder. Joe starts taking Advil just to get through the day. He gets massages, but that doesn't really help. His symptoms come back the minute he tries to use his hands at the keyboard. Joe finally decides to go to the doctor. His doctor is puzzled and looks up his symptoms on the internet and decides to give Joe a prescription for a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication. After a while, Joe got major gastrointestinal problems from the drugs, and it didn't address the pain other than to mask it. Now Joe has stomach problems in addition to RSI. Joe went back to the doctor, who decided to give him a steroid injection. It didn't help, and the doctor didn't warn him that steroid injections could rupture tendons, something Joe would have liked to have known before he agreed to the injection. Movement hurt, so the doctor gave him splints. The splints made him feel somewhat better because they prevented painful movement, so he used them at work, at the keyboard. But his doctor neglected to tell Joe not to use the splints while he was working at the keyboard, and after a while he got tremendously weak from wearing the splints all the time. Now, the slightest thing seemed to exhaust his forearms. He tried doing strengthening exercises like push-ups, but that made everything worse. So Joe went back to the doctor, and this time the doctor sent him to physical therapy. His physical therapist gave him some very aggressive deep tissue massage. Joe told her it hurt, but instead of lightening up the pressure, she said that was normal. Then his physical therapist told him to do some wrist curls to strengthen his wrists. When Joe complained that the exercises bothered his wrist, she said he was weak, so she added more weight, erroneously thinking that would strengthen his weak muscles. But Joe was weak from overuse, and the tissue was scarred, so the exercises made the situation even worse. She didn't know that you couldn't strengthen scar tissue, and doing exercises with handheld weights would just make everything worse. Strengthening exercises are meant to stimulate and improve the muscle fiber's ability to contract. Since scar tissue lacks this elasticity, these exercises won't strengthen muscles the way they would if the muscles were healthy. Nor did she know that she should have been strengthening his postural muscles so that he could sit up straight rather than straining his already damaged upper limbs by slouching. Now Joe was in screaming pain. not just intermittently like it had been before, but all the time. Joe was lagging behind at work. One day he realized he just couldn't keep up the pace and thought he would take a couple of weeks off to heal. He felt somewhat better during that time because he wasn't using the computer or mouse at all. But when he went back to work, all the pain came back with a vengeance within minutes. After several rounds of time off, returning to work and relapses, Joe finally quit his job. He knew it was either that or he was going to get fired. By now, his hands were so weak he could hardly lift a coffee mug for more than a few seconds, much less spend days at the keyboard coding. So what happened to Joe? He bought an ergonomic chair and keyboard, like the internet and all the advertising says. How come that didn't help? Joe had repetitive strain injury, and it's a serious disability of the muscles, nerve, tendons of the upper extremity. He got injured for a number of reasons, not the least of which was his so-called ergonomic chair. Poor posture is a leading cause of repetitive strain injury, especially the forward head posture, where you are looking forward and down as in viewing your phone or a monitor. And that was exactly how Joe sat, collapsed against the backrest for hours on end. It shortened the muscles in the front of his neck, compressing the nerves that led to the numbness and tingling in his fingers. You can't use your hands properly unless you are sitting in good posture, because the use of the arm is weakened when you're leaning back on the backrest of your chair. When Joe finally got some good guidance and realized how his poor posture had led to RSI, he literally straightened up. He improved his ergonomic setup and also learned how to keep his wrists straight, took breaks at least every 20 minutes and more often if he was feeling symptoms, stood up frequently, and stopped working before he was in pain. He learned what good posture meant and faithfully performed an intelligent exercise program every morning to maintain muscular strength to hold his good posture. It didn't cure his RSI, but learning how to dictate, sitting tall at the computer and everywhere else, and moving as much as possible, eventually enabled him to become self-employed, so he could take as many breaks as he needed during the day without worrying that his boss would tell him to get back to work. It also helped him reduce his chronic pain because he wasn't doing the things that led to injury anymore. He improved his technique. He improved his posture. He improved his pacing. Joe was especially lucky because his doctor wanted to give him carpal tunnel surgery release, even though later he found out he didn't even have carpal tunnel syndrome, and unnecessary surgery can lead to very poor results. But many people who work at computers aren't as lucky as Joe and become completely disabled, all for lack of proper posture, seating, and knowledge about how to hold their hands at the keyboard. So what's the best advice? Sit as tall as you can, and don't use your backrest, especially if you're using your computer, keyboard, or mouse. Dictate whenever possible. Do exercises that strengthen the postural muscles of the back without straining your hands every day. Take frequent breaks. And pay attention to the early warning signs of repetitive strain injury, because once you're in stage 3, it becomes chronic. For more important information about repetitive strain injury, watch the video that's coming up next or linked in the details below.